City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, performance.
We are delighted to welcome you to the 30th year of the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars. We are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars give you an opportunity to hear a candid description of what it is like to work in the theater of today. The subject of the seminar you are about to see is performance. Our guests, all notable actors, will describe the experiences that brought them to the front of the footlights. I am Sandra Gilman, first Vice Chair of the American Theater Wing. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator of this panel, Howard Sherman, Executive Director of the American Theater Wing.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you all. I could easily spend the first 20 minutes of this seminar just giving you the extraordinary range of credits of the performers that we have on the panel today. So I'm going to keep it very brief, and throughout you'll hear more about the many things that they've done. Let me introduce, beginning on my right, Martha Plimpton, most recently on Broadway in 16 Wounded, Jefferson Mays, appearing on Broadway in I Am My Own Wife, Phylicia Rashad, from the recently opened revival of A Raisin in the Sun, and Heche, now in the revival and revised version of 20th Century at the Roundabout Theater Company, and Richard Thomas appearing in the Stendhal Syndrome off-Broadway at primary stages. Thank you all for being here. When we put together these panels, which we only get to do a couple of times a year, to say, how do we pick 5 performers out of the hundreds? We just stop and say, who's interesting? Who might be neat to have together? And then, as I began to think about how do we begin this, we have to look for commonality. And I started thinking that so many of these performers are people that we know because they've been on our TV screens or in our living rooms at various times in their lives. And so I wondered about the issue of expectations. As performers, do you find that when you're working, people come to the work you do? Do you know if people come to the work you do with particular expectations of what they're going to see from you? And then do you have to take them somewhere from where they start from to where they get to in the performance that you're giving? Let me start with Richard, who is certainly playing against type, many would say, in the Stendhal Syndrome, as a
I'll take that as a compliment.
as a crazed bisexual orchestra conductor.
And you're not that?
No, and I haven't even played it on TV, so it's all.
Wow.
But I'm thinking about taking it up. I think because of the years that I spent, there are obvious things in my history that lend themselves to the question, because after I grew up in New York working in the theater from the time I was a child. I was a child actor here in New York. But then I went away and I did a very popular television series for years, The Waltons. And so when I first came back to New York, after that had been successful, and I'd grown up working in the theater in New York, it was very clear to me that when I got back on stage here, everybody was waiting to see it, but people hadn't, they were like, well, can he really act on stage? Or all the questions people ask when someone who hasn't been in the last few seasons gets up or is famous for something else. But I didn't worry too much about it. I loved the part, and it turned out to be okay. But I could feel in the house, the expectations of what they were coming to. They were coming to see me because they knew me from something else, and I think some of them were wondering if I was going to be any good on stage, and some of them didn't worry about it. But if you have a good show to do and you have a part you love, then you just try to give them the experience of the play, and the rest of it is up to them. You can't drag them with you.
Martha, we've been watching you since your adolescence. And then to see you taking on roles like, for example, Hedda Gabler, which is a long ways away from some of your early films.
Yeah. I have to tell you, just in terms of what I expect from an audience, generally, hopefully, is their, attention and their indulgence and their, generous ear. But having been in a fairly popular movie from the 80s, which has gained a sort of cult status in the intervening years, it's something of a risk I've found going up on stage, because people will yell things at you. And in Hedda Gabler in specific, we were doing at Long Wharf. I remember we were doing an afternoon performance for some college students, not Yale students, I should hasten to add, but college students from around the state. And at the beginning of the second act, the characters of Hedda and Thea are sleeping. It's the morning of the following day. And Thea is sort of restlessly pacing and wondering where Loveborg is, and Hedda is very calmly sleeping on the couch, not concerned really about anything. And the lights came up, this sort of gentle, sort of, sounds of morning coming in through the window, and, sweet and simple dawn. And I'm laying there, deep asleep, and I hear, Goonies! So yeah, there you go.
And you expected that, yeah. You don't want them to do that in the future? Is that the idea?
You know what? It's fine. I just like a little warning. Because for the rest of the show, I really was thinking, dear Lord, how am I going to do this? I'm a Goonie again.
Yeah.
I'm a Goonie to this person.
You can't. After I about 2 weeks into 5th of July, one afternoon after Jeff Daniels came out and we had this big kiss, and from the back of the house, John Boy's a I said, nevertheless, we're going to do this play.
Of course, they had said the same thing about Superman before you, Rich.
But I should also add that there's a wonderful thing about it, in that it brings people who might not have otherwise come to the theater, which is really the biggest plus about it. So I'm actually quite grateful for it.
Well, and so that leads me to ask Phylicia, because certainly there are some audiences coming to Raise in the Sun who are being drawn in from so many different worlds, because you are perhaps best known for your television work, though you've got this extensive stage work. You've got Audra McDonald, who's a 3-time Tony winner, and then you have Sean Combs. Do you find the audience is taking time to adjust to everyone together, or whether the audiences are really prepared for what they're getting into with Raisin?
There's a phenomenon going on there at the Royale Theatre. When performers make their entrances, Audra first, there's always applause. And so when you're standing backstage, you know, those are the theater goers. They know her well. When Sean makes his entrance, there's this wild scream that just goes all over creation. And you know, those are the young people, and they're not shy. And then Sanaa makes her entrance as Beneatha, and you hear this other round of applause, and you say, film goers. Film goers. And then I come in, and then you hear this other thing, and you say, television watchers. But then it all changes. it all changes, and the audience, which is the most diverse audience I've ever seen, becomes one community. The audience becomes one ear. The audience becomes one set of eyes. It's like the audience becomes one person. And it's amazing. And they come totally with the story, and I think that has a lot to do with the force of this writing, and that it's such a human story and a humanizing story. That, let's say, the least likely are just at the end. Sean said, no, I've got some friends who are tough dudes, and they were sitting in the audience saying, man, I had to check myself. I was starting to cry, I had to check myself. And that's the beauty and the power of theater, wouldn't you say?
It's great.
Yeah,
So great.
Theater is life. Theater does this.
And for you, so many of your film roles have been contemporary roles, and certainly your first Broadway appearance in Proof was a contemporary role. Now you're appearing in something which is a very stylized 30s comedy. Again, is that an adjustment for your audience? What kind of adjustment is that for you?
I don't know. I think I approach roles in the same way, whether it's a modern role or this. I kind of like to fall into the world of it, and being in the 30s screwball comedy is certainly a new world for me. And I'm with a group of incredible players, including Alec Baldwin, of course, and I find that because, and this is where publicity kind of has come into play. Everybody kind of set up that this was some crazy screwball comedy with Alec Baldwin and Anne Heche. And what it did was kind of allow people to come into the theater with, oh, they're outrageous and the show is outrageous. So people are very open to the experience. And where I find my expectation is within myself to, after having done such a dramatic role in Proof, that I wanted, my expectation was I'm going to give them something completely different and something they've never seen from me. And fortunately I had, a lot of, honestly, press out there saying 20th Century is this. And so people came open-minded, and I said, well, let's give them a show. And it's been it's been really fun.
And Jefferson, you haven't got the same familiarity of being in people's homes, but you have a different challenge in I Am My Own Wife because you aren't inhabiting a single character, but all of them. And of course, I think many people do come to the show saying, what is this? How is this going to be? How has that worked for you? And how do you draw them into the countless characters that you play?
Well, it's been lovely because people come to see I Am My Own Wife with no expectations whatsoever about me or the play, because nobody knows who I am, and nobody knows anything about this singular character. I remember in a matinee recently entering at the top of the show and hearing a man in the matinee audience cry out in injured tones, "It's a man!" So it's sort of nobody really knows what to expect. Most one-person shows are like, I'm thinking of True or Full Gallop, are based on famous people. Belle of Amherst. People have preconceptions, but nobody knows who Charlotte von Malsdorf is. And what Doug has done is an extraordinary thing. I think he introduces the audience to this person, and they feel as though they get to know her, and then ultimately, I hope, leave the theater with more questions about her identity than they had to begin with.
And you had the opportunity to really develop this piece from very early on. So it was modeled certainly modeled on the real performers, and you were in fact working with the playwright who is himself a character in the play. How did that development come about, and how did you shape the play as an integral part of it?
Yeah, it was a rare luxury to be, well, I was called up by Doug, who said, would you like to be in a play that hasn't been written yet? And I said, oh, yeah, what's it about? And he said, well, it's about a 65-year-old East German transvestite. And I said, absolutely, yeah. That's what I've been dying to play. I think it's time.
Is it fair to mention briefly that just before that you'd played Peter Pan?
Yes. Yes. I needed something to shake me up a little bit out of it. So I was involved from the get-go. It was just the head of Sundance Theater Lab, Robert Blacker, called Doug up and knew Doug had experienced about 10 years of writer's block with this play. He just felt he didn't have the authority to write about the history of 20th century Germany through this marginalized perspective. Robert said to Doug, of course you don't. You're a privileged, gay white male from Texas, and you can't write about Germany. But what you can write about is your relationship with Charlotte von Mahlsdorf. And so he said, just bring a director that you love, and he chose Moses Kaufman, who is adept, as you know, dealing with found material, documentary sort of theater, Gross Indecency, Laramie Project, and a cast, and come out to the mountains of Utah and just sit around a table and try to make something over the course of 3 weeks. And he said, well, I don't know. I don't know how many people I need. And he said, well, just bring one actor to just read it aloud and just in front of you, and then see what you can make. So we just sat with hours and hours of transcripted interviews in this huge stack in the middle of the table and sifted through it, found things that struck us and interested us, started to juxtapose them, and then little by little the play emerged from that.
So that raises a question for all of you as performers. The opportunity to create a role for the first time in a new piece of work versus taking on a piece which has been done previously and in some cases may have been done for hundreds of years previously. Is there a difference in attacking those roles or is it fundamentally the same process? Martha?
Shall I?
You shall.
For me, anyway, I mean, obviously I wouldn't speak for anyone else. For me, it's not too terribly different to process. I think that, the main difference being whether or not you have the luxury of having a living playwright there with you to help you, or not, whatever the case may be.
And we're coming back to that.
Yes.
But I think, in terms of, for example, just doing Heche, use that example one more time, it's, we could have, I suppose, been quite nervous about putting on Heche, particularly since I was the youngest person to play the role since its original production in Ibsen's time. She's written as 29, but often played by women quite a bit more mature and accomplished, generally. And that could have been quite nerve-wracking. But we approached it like sort of in the way Doug Hughes used to say, our director, I sort of feel this play suffers from title character syndrome, It's called Hedda Gabler, but she's Hedda Tessman in the text. And in that sense, we don't really know who this woman is, and there's no reason for us to be nervous about how she's been played in the past, or, whatever film there is on it, or whatever, research we could have done. We didn't really need to adhere to any of those rules, which was nice. And in that sense, we were free, really, to do what we pleased. And I think, as a result, we did some, very sort of interesting, at least for us, work that was pretty exciting. But for a new play, and I have to admit, I've only originated one or two roles, which is, I suppose, maybe a little unusual. The fun is really having the playwright there to help and to see the actor that he's got in front of him or her, and sort of find a way to give his character life through them. And that's always a very exhilarating bonding process.
Richard, you've done so many classical plays over the years, and Stendhal was an opportunity to create a role.
It's nice to work with dead playwrights.
We'll tell Terrence you said that.
No, with a lot of exceptions, of course. I actually did. That was because someone was. I don't know if it was Mark Lamos or someone was doing something with the concept we had for Hamlet. Somebody said, "You're going to do that?" And he says, "He's dead. He won't mind." It is fundamentally the same process, I think. I mean, it's you have the text and you have the character, and you spend your time getting to know the character and bringing it to you and you to it. It's exciting to be in the room of the playwright. A little scary for me because it's very easy for me to put someone else at the center of my process. So if there's a playwright there who's writing the play, I sort of take their expectations and put them in the middle of me, which sometimes makes it hard for me to really feel where I'm at. It takes time to make it my own. But I think it's a great privilege to work with a playwright and to create a role. Stendhal syndrome has actually been kicking around for a while in workshop. It's never had a full production, but it was in pretty tight shape by the time we started rehearsal. So he didn't make a lot of changes in that. The first act he's worked on because it's brand new. But when he sent it to me, and I thought, well, no one's seen this produced in the theater before, and certainly no one's seen me in this. It was thrilling, actually, to know that there were no expectations about the role. But once it shows up and running, and people are talking about it, they bring those expectations in. You know, we're all expecting something. You know, I expect abject adoration by the end of the at the beginning. You know, and when the process starts, and then by opening night, I wake up as if to be hanged. You know, I just hope that there's going to be a phone call from the governor, and I'll make it alive. But the classics are great because you feel, and Jefferson, has a lot of experience that you've taken a great dive into this river, the time river of the theater, where all these wonderful plays flow through it, all these fabulous actors have been in them and done them, and it can be daunting, but at the same time, it's fantastic to jump into that flow and to feel the ghosts and the choices, and in many plays choices you've read about and things that actors have done that they did 200 years ago that are talked about. So it's a great feeling of participation and continuity. That's very satisfying in the classics. You can't make it yours. You can just bring what you can bring to it.
Of course, in theater, it becomes an oral history. For the most part, we can read about what a performance was like, but we can't see it. I'm curious to ask Anne and Phylicia, in the case of Raising the Sun, clearly that's an iconic piece, and there is a film that people can go back and see. And not from theater, but you actually did a very unusual thing, which was the remake of Psycho with the original script and shot by shot. Do you go back? Do you see the originals? Do you keep them away from you when you're?
Oh goodness, I don't want to see the originals. I'm the original. Well, you have to think like that, don't you?
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to think like that, because I learned that as an understudy for years and years and years. I was an understudy. And one of the first lessons I learned as an understudy was that my real job was to go on stage and not bump into anybody, allow people the people who did it regularly, the actors who performed their roles regularly, to have the freedom to do what it was that they did without creating confusion, but to bring something that was totally new and original for them to respond to. And so every actor is the original, or should be.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I had a kind of interesting experience because Psycho is a little bit different, but Proof, I asked to do Proof after two incredible actresses. Mary Stewart had won a Tony for it. Jennifer Jason Leigh obviously is an amazing actress, and they wanted to close the show, so they asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, by all means. I had not seen either one of them, and I was glad that I hadn't, only because to approach it, I needed to go in with my own character. But it was very interesting because we got a new cast, but I realized in the rehearsal process, oh, I was sitting in this chair because she sat in this chair. The whole play had already been done. All the lighting was done. So even though it felt like a new show, which, you know, Dan Sullivan, thank God, made it feel that way for us as actors, really we were just fitting into what had already been, you know, orchestrated. And that was really awesome because it was new, and yet we were on the same set, and it was really incredible. And then 20th Century, of course, had been done, it's been done in every incarnation about 7 times by a million different people, Carole Lombard being the most famous in the movie. And I just, you know, no thanks, didn't want to see it, didn't want to play Carole Lombard, I wanted to play Lily Garland. And that's, you know, it just is that. You have to come in with yourself, and also I feel like, and did feel like, I didn't want to come in with an entire cast of people who were going to bring themselves to the plate and be able to be in a rehearsal process with an idea of something I already knew. I wanted our director to be able to give his point of view on 20th Century. Ken Ludwig, of course, did an incredible adaptation of our show. And I wanted them to be able to have a fresh actress and point of view. And that seems to be, and you know, I've only done 2 plays, so I don't know what the future is going to bring. But I might start looking at the other things in the future. I certainly would like to see your Hedda. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that
It's
would
extraordinary.
be, wow.
I
would
saw
like
it.
that opportunity. And that is so why, I mean, it is, I wish I could go back and see Jennifer Jason Leigh do Proof. You know, it's just, that's one of the things that I wish I could do, but that's the beauty
I think
of
that's one of the
theater,
fun
too.
things about all of this is that you'll find yourself talking to an actor who's played the same role you've played in a
Yeah.
different production somewhere else, and you talk about this because nothing is ever, it's all impermanent, and it's all done over and over again, and we all slip into each other's shoes all the time. I'm a terrible one preparing a classical role. I'm a terrible one for reading everything and listening. I listen to every recording.
Yes.
I start
really?
with I'm not because I want to give that performance, because I know I can't. I mean, I can't give Gielgud's performance in Richard II, and I can't give, but I just take as much on board as I can, mainly in terms of Shakespeare, just for clarity and listening to things that make things clear to me. But I like to take it all on board. I get frustrated because I can't. Then I find myself not being able to do any of those great things. Not that I'm trying to do them, but those shadows and those ghosts. But they're there anyway. They're lurking. They're in the wings. They're watching. They're all around. I think it's one of the fun things. With 5th of July, I went to the theater all the time and watched, because I had to go in a very brief time. So I really felt like an understudy coming in, actually, in that performance. And I didn't want, and it was such an exquisite ensemble. I didn't want to. I wanted to just fit in. But then as we played, over the months, it started to evolve and change, and people started to step back and make room for what I was doing, and so everything shifted. But I went in pretty much as if I were coming in as an understudy. You know.
I'll tell you something else that's really cool about originating a role is getting your name in the first published version.
It is, isn't it? I've been wondering this. I think when they publish this, let's see, do the workshops
These are
count?
the things actors really care about.
It's sad. That's the only permanent thing we have.
That's right, it is.
Semi-permanent.
Exactly. Do you know what I think will be so interesting? Somebody came to the stage door the other day and she said, I saw you in Proof, and I'm in high school, and I played the role in Proof, and I didn't want to see you before I did it in high school. And I said, so, and then she came to the show, and and I said, so were we similar? She said, absolutely not. I was nothing like you. I enjoyed watching it, but no. I was like, wow, I should have met you then. You know, you could have given me some pointers. But David Auburn, of course, won the Pulitzer Prize. And what I think is so interesting is that show then went across to every high school. And I'm curious because, of course, your show.
That's right. I can't wait. The high schools of America.
I mean, I just think that's going to be so interesting because so many people are going to be taking on, and so many students are going to be trying to figure out the complicated performances that you give, and it will be so interesting.
That
in
is
your
interesting.
life,
I can't wait till
think.
the 16-year-old captain of the football team is
Yeah.
playing Charlotte von Malsdorf.
Right.
Well, you know, when Lily Tomlin's show, The Search for the Signs of Intelligent Life in the
What a
Universe,
great
went
show.
out and was done regionally and probably in stock productions, they actually had multiple people play the roles. So they actually broke it up.
That's
It
interesting.
would be curious to think
Yes,
about,
it
you
would
know.
certainly be fairer to the drama club. I
Well,
think.
as we know, the drama club is, you know, you sell the tickets based on how many parents of how
Right.
many kids are in the show. So your show is not easy box office across America at our high schools.
Oh.
But since we're talking about schools, I want to ask about that. Some of you started very, very young in the field. Richard, you got your equity card at 7. How did you all get into acting? What was the break that got you started in all of this? Felicia.
You mean professionally?
I think that was both. How did you start? Just even getting on stage the first time, and then the first professional break.
Well, beauty was always an issue for me as a child because my parents were absolutely stunning. My sister was cute as pie. All of the girls ran after my brother. And every time I looked in the mirror, I thought, well, when I was born, God was on a lunch break.
Oh my God.
This is how young people can think, you know. It's really something when you're always comparing yourself to people around you. You will always, if you're always comparing yourself to other people, you can trick yourself easily into believing you're greater than or less than instead of just being who you are. When I was 11 years old, because of my speech patterns that my mother had insisted upon, grew up in Houston, Texas, but we spoke as if we were from someplace else. I was selected.
Presumably not Brooklyn.
No, not Brooklyn. I was selected to be the mistress of ceremonies for an interscholastic musical presentation. There were all of the schools. And I had learned my script so well that on the night of the performance, I stood in a spotlight for the first time. The light was blinding. I had my script in my hand, but because I had studied it and prepared so well, I didn't have to read it. I stood and I talked to the light. And I just talked to the light all night long. And when the evening was finished and people were leaving the Coliseum, I heard several mothers say, "Oh, there's the little girl who spoke so beautifully. Isn't she beautiful?" And I thought, that's it. When I grow up, I'll be an actress. And they're beautiful all the time.
Wow.
But what I didn't understand and wouldn't be able to articulate for many years was that the beauty that I had experienced had nothing to do with what I was wearing or the curls in my hair or the ruffles on my socks. It was the beauty of communication from the heart. And that's what acting is it not?
Oh, I mean, we only hope. We only hope it's as beautiful as what you just said. Yes, that communication and experience.
Yeah.
So let's stay with first experiences. So Richard, you went right into professional work. You skipped the high school shows.
I did. My folks were professional dancers in the ballet, and I was sort of raised in the backstage and started professionally, actually, in a production of a play called Sunrise at Campobello about the Roosevelt family in 1958, and it was terrific. I'd been in the wings my whole small childhood, and then trotted out and did that. But the thing about that experience that was so exciting to me was I wasn't in the last act, so I was always brought home before the curtain call. But towards the end of the run, they said, "Why don't you let him stay for the curtain call?" So one of the most vivid experiences for me, aside from making my first entrance with James Earl Jones, it was his Broadway debut as well, and he was just the dearest, kindest man to me to make me feel comfortable and at ease. Was when they let me take a bow the very first time, with the whole company, at the curtain call, which didn't seem like such a big idea, but at 7 it was just extraordinary. But my favorite early sort of starting thing was when I auditioned for, and I'll tell it just because as a child, it was the greatest audition anybody could ever have. I was 10, and I auditioned for Strange Interlude, the first Broadway production of the Actors Studio. And I went to Jose Quintero, to his office at the studio. And he sat down and he said, "So, what do you want to be more than anything in the world?" I said, "An actor." He said, "That's it, you got the part." All actors should have that audition.
Yes.
and that was the moment in which I thought, oh, okay, yes, if I say this is what I am, then this is what I can be. Wow. And so that was a kind of beginning for me.
Jefferson? I came to it very late in college, actually. It was my first play. But I think that I also came to it very early. I grew up in a house with no television in it. It fell off the table sometime during the Vietnam War. The family basset hound ran underneath and got caught in the cord, and it smashed. And that was a strange sort of blessing, because my parents then, at the end of every meal, we would read a family novel. We would read David Copperfield or Great Expectations, generally Dickens, some Thurber. But anyway, all of 5 of us would pass the novel around the table and each read a few pages or a chapter. And I think that was the first time that I encountered theater. It was just the spoken word and these wonderful narratives, and hearing my father's voice, and he was sort of a removed narrator. I mean, and my mother would inhabit every character very fully, and I remember watching her face just transform as she was reading. And I was very frustrated because, those Dickensian sentences, they go on for pages, and coming to commas, and I would just be furious. And in my sort of pre-literate days, I couldn't read, of course, in my pre-literate days. So I would hear, a Mr. Monroe story from James Thurber, and then I would get up and sort of act out a little Mr. Monroe vignette of some kind. So I think that was my introduction to theater. It was just sort of around the campfire of the dining room table. Martha?
Well, it wasn't dissimilar from Richard's story, really. I was, my parents were both, well, my mother was in the original company of Hair at the Public Theater in 1967, and she then moved to Broadway with it in 1968, and my father came in to replace James Rado as Claude. And that was in 1970. And I was conceived in the spring of that year. I'm not sure if it was in the Biltmore Theater. During
the second act.
But there was a lot going on. And so, by the end of 1970, when I emerged, wet and screaming from my mother's womb, I was in the theater every single day until I was about 3 years old. And my babysitters were the tribe, these wonderful, wonderful actors and people who, and also strange people who just, who Ragney and Rado and Galt McDermott had just literally pulled out of Washington Square Park to be in the show. These people cared for me and raised me. And so I didn't know any other life. I don't know any other life, which at times has frustrated me, because I've often thought, well, maybe I would be a better actor had I come to it as a young woman rather than as an infant. Had I made a conscious choice, maybe I would approach it differently, be more intellectual about it, have a more rigorous, technique or system if I'd gone to college or what have you. But I didn't. I just grew up in it and spent most of my life going to plays and seeing pretty much everything. My mother had no restrictions on what I was permitted to see from a very early age. I remember seeing a production of Titus Andronicus that just blew my 5-year-old brain. What? A Streetcar Named Desire. I remember seeing Threepenny Opera in the park. These are my earliest memories, and I realize it sounds rather pretentious, because it just does. But that's but that's really how I came to it, and then it just was a natural way to behave. And I made. I remember my mother was dating a fellow. Tom O'Horgan was directing a play on Broadway called The Leaf People, which ran for about 7 performances, I think. It was all about people living in the jungles of the Amazon, and everyone was painted from head to toe green, and swinging on vines and singing these crazy avant-garde songs, and it was on Broadway. And I remember my first image of myself on stage is exactly the same as yours. We were there so often that Tom said one night, just paint her and put her out there. And I think I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I completely tow-headed, this white hair, and, you know, maybe this big, and with a they just wrapped a loincloth around me, painted me green in that sort of noxious grease paint, you know, that smell, head to toe green, and just carried me out for the curtain call, and in the line of green people, and I just looked out at this enormous, just this sea of faces. It was just, I'll never forget it as long as I live. And I'll also never forget that smell.
It doesn't smell like that anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't smell like that. It had a very specific kind of smell.
Yes, it did.
Like a clay almost.
Were you in that play?
No, Rich just used to paint up occasionally.
Yeah, I just paint up. I painted up from the time I was a small one.
Yeah.
No, that just, all that Stein's grease stick.
Yeah, exactly, that
I grew up
grease stick
smelling it
stuff.
in-
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
just for pleasure.
Purely for pleasure,
Yes,
yes. It only became business later on.
Yeah.
So, Anne?
I was raised in a family. It's funny, I kind of feel like my pretending happened very young. We were not only pretending we weren't from the place we were from, which was a rural Ohio, we were pretending we were not the people that we were. We were pretending we were richer than we were. We were pretending we were not, you know, living in the house that we were living in. It was not our car. These are not our clothes. I mean, the whole thing was a big fat pretend. So I do feel that I was learning from a very, very young age to lie very well. And when the door opened a little bit to say, we're broke and we all need to get jobs. And I was 12 and I couldn't do much, but I could babysit. And I ended up babysitting for a family in Ocean City, New Jersey, who owned a dinner theater in Swainton, New Jersey called the 76 House Dinner Theater. And they were going to put up a show of Music Man, and I used to sing in church with my father, and they were paying $100 a week, and boy did I get up on that stage and try to belt out, you know, Gary, Indiana. And I think maybe 3 girls auditioned, but I was lucky enough to get the part, and ended up being in the 76 House Dinner Theater for 2 years, being in all of these, you know, ridiculous musicals as the youngest girl, and they all kind of took me under their wing, and at 2 o'clock in the morning I was sitting around a bar with a whole bunch of New Jersey actors wanting to be on Broadway, and they were drunk and I was drunk, and like, okay, I think I can do this. No, I was only 12, so I wasn't drinking yet. But it became my life. It became my actually home away. It became my home. My home was a big mess, and this became a place where I could really be myself. And speaking to, continuing to go back to, I didn't choose acting. That I could just work. And then in high school, I was in high school plays, and then I was asked to be on a soap opera, and I was like, well, this will get me out of my house, So yes, I'll move to New York. Great. And then I was there for 4 years, and that was an incredible job. But after 4 years, I thought, I didn't decide to be an actress. They just hired me to be an actress. I'm going to go and be a designer. So I applied to school, and then somebody offered me a movie, and I was like, okay, I didn't decide to do this. I still haven't decided. And I really feel like I decided to be an actress when I came to do Proof on Broadway. And I stepped out, and 2 girls had already done the show, and it was a huge success. And I stepped out on stage, and I saw the faces for the first time of people in the audience, and I was like, this is amazing. And I restated my goal to acting and said, this is what I want to do. And this year, I mean, it just continues to be something that I restate. Doing this show on Broadway, originating at least at this time, this show, this character in 20th Century, I reclaimed being an actress again. And I don't know if that will, I don't know if that will continue, that will stop. But I always thought the same thing, you know. I didn't go to school. I mean, this has all just been luck. It's all just been, I need a job, you know. And I've really just begun to own and claim the kind of space of, I'm an actress. This is what I want to do, and I've just started to really pursue it, actually, with that understanding and that love for the theater that came when I did Proof.
It's fascinating that each of you rooted that story in coming from family.
Yeah.
And touching on something that Richard had mentioned earlier, the issue of an ensemble. And we all hear the cliche all of the time that theater is a big family, a cast is a family. What helps you to be part of an ensemble? What is the environment? What are the actions that meld a cast together? I can do my one-liner and say, of course, Jefferson is I Am My Own Ensemble as well in this particular production. Thank you.
Wonderful cast. Generous.
But I am wondering, because it is fascinating to see how casts do, or in some cases don't, come together. And I'm wondering what creates the best experience? What are the elements that make that work, or what are the deterrents?
I would love to just jump in here on this one, because it's something I've been sort of obsessing over for the last year or so. Having had a variety of experiences with wonderful, people. I think the director is almost the most important thing in bringing people together. I think that first day of rehearsal, we all come from these sort of disparate backgrounds with these varying ideas of what the play should be and what we want to do with the play when we come into the room, and maybe we know we have to keep our minds open, but we have a plan because we took this role because it was something in there that we needed to look at or explore. And everyone comes into the room with their own version of that. And a truly great ensemble, I think, is formed when the director can sort of bring all of those people together on that first day or maybe the second. Doesn't matter. It should be in the first week, I think. It should be early. And sort of lays out their vision of the world, of the story that we want to tell, the story we are here to tell. They sort of open an umbrella and sort of welcome everyone in the cast into it and sort of shelter them in that. That's not to say that it oughtn't to be a fluid and elastic vision. Of course, it always should be. But it's so important to establish that early so that we all know we're in service of the same thing, so that we all know our mandate in a strange way. And then we can all trust each other. We needn't worry, whose ego is deciding where they should be standing. We all, or whose nerves are making it hard for them to express something, because we have the director's idea to come to. For me, anyway, that's what it's an immediate way to sort of break down all of that stuff and have everyone really sort of come together right away and be on the same page. Of course, it's, nothing is foolproof, but in my opinion, without a great director, an ensemble tends to flounder.
Hear, hear.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Nothing worse than being on board an unguided missile.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the idea that one of the People ask about differences between working, film and television and working in the theater. I like the idea that everybody comes together every day to all do it together and make it.
Yeah.
There are people I've met people at the wrap parties of movies that were in the movies I was in that I never. Or shows that I never met. It's
sure.
important people doing important parts of a picture that I don't have. I wasn't a part of that. But there's something about everyone coming together, even listening. How's that scene going tonight? When you're not out there, and sharing each other's terrific moments with each other as they've come off stage. That sounds like it really went well. Sort of passing the baton, and everyone coming together every night to tell the whole story together creates a great feeling of ensemble for me, and a feeling of family. No question for me that there's a familial hook in my love, my need for the theater.
Walter Bobby directed the 20th Century Revival, and he's such a wonderful director. And so much to me, it is that, yes, and also attitude of that director, of that leader, who wants to, we've all worked with a lot of jerks, and we've all worked with a lot of fabulous people. And when that director comes in, Walter came in to the first day with this utter enthusiasm and thrill for the fact that we were going to do 20th Century. He thought it was hysterical. He thought it was fun. Yeah. He told us all, we all gathered around, and he just, stroked our egos. He told us all how thrilled he was, and that energy, not only that, and then he brought in William Ivy Long, the costume designer, John Lee Beatty, the production designer, and all of a sudden we were shown models of the set, we were shown costumes from the 30s, this like show and tell of these group of artists who were going to work on this show. The lighting designers came in. Everybody came into this first day, and it was like, I had never participated in that because in Proof it was already up and going. And I was like, wow, this is stunning. This is what people talk about in the theater. This is being a part of something that is so fresh and so awesome, and every single person in this room is so talented. And we're all going to do something together. And now we're all going to play. We're all putting on a play. And it was just, that attitude of that leader is so important to me. And that just got in all of us, and we were all bubbling, and every day we came to work, we were thrilled. Although I have heard that it is a kind of rare opportunity. Everybody says, oh no, don't think that this is the way that it always is. It's not always this way. We have a great group of people, but from what I'm hearing, it is that way. People do come together in that family and try to make it happen every night, 8 shows a week. It's crazy.
I agree. Those early days are so important.
What is the vibe?
They're so important. And when the designers bring in their ideas to the world you're going to inhabit and what you're going to wear, and that it's a great gift. It's a great feeling of that still that anything is possible.
It is awesome, John Lee Beatty. I'm sorry, we are on a train. This is the 20th Century. The train moves. We're in the first day, and he's saying this is going to go like this, and this is going to go like this, and then the set is going to split open. I'm like, what? What? On stage? What? It's just mind-blowing. And that's so fun. And then you watch all of these artists build every single day. The layers come, not only with character, but then the set gets built. The lighting comes on. It's awesome. I'm sorry. You're like, oh, I really love that theater. It's so cool.
Phylicia, Jefferson, the same experiences, really, with a cast coming together?
Absolutely. I just am loving hearing what you say, Anne, about that the initial presentation. The thing I was just thinking about was what I love so much about the theater is this. This sounds cynical, but it's not. The collective lying that goes on, the absolutely bald-faced artifice of it.
Right.
Where it's not sleight of hand; it's just out and out lying.
Right.
In what we do with space and time on stage, and that is its beauty, because it's all these people working very hard with open, full hearts to lie, and the audience enters into that glorious lie. And we don't make any bones about it. It is artifice. This is fake. but we are entering into it, and through achieving a wonderful lie, it becomes the truth, you know, it becomes...
Well, and what's so funny is we all run
beautiful.
around, of course, going, am I being truthful in this moment? Am I being
Yes, yes.
I don't know if I'm being truthful
Right.
in this
Yes,
moment.
honesty,
I'm
honesty.
like, oh,
But it's an
I don't know if
honest
you're being
lie.
truthful.
It's
Wait,
very
what's going on here?
Yes, getting to that time where you really drop the drama, and you're just in it.
Just in it.
Believing that lie. It's called
Yes.
pathological lie.
I don't think of it as a lie. I don't
Being
think of any.
facetious.
I've never thought of anything. Well, there was one time, and I had the playwright. I said, "Honey, you got to fix this."
This is a lie.
Because right, I think of theater as truth. We have this saying: theater is life, film is art, and television is furniture. Yeah,
Yes, I know.
theater is life. Theater is life, and it's a representation of life. And if there is no truth in it, if I approached the work that I do as artifice, I couldn't get through it, because I'm always looking for the truth, and I'm always looking for the truth that's not on the page. It's what's not on the page that's exciting to me.
Sure.
And that's not something that I make my mind up about. That's something that'll occur to me when I'm washing a cup, or frying an egg, or walking the dog, looking at the change in the seasons. Oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's why she says that. Oh, that's how she's feeling then. Oh, that's what that memory is. It's all of the things that are never on the page.
Yet it's interesting because there are comments about, you made the comment about, you know, talking to the playwright and saying, you got to fix that.
Because it wasn't the truth. And I wasn't going to say it.
Well, it raises the question, as performers, certainly in new works or in classical works where you're working with a director and shaping it, how much do you feel you have the right, the responsibility to make it work for you, and how much do you have to subsume to a director's vision? What's the balance there?
I think without that first day that I was just talking about, you don't know. You can't plan for that. The first day sets the tone for how people will be communicating with each other for the rest of the process. And if the tone is not set in a, first of all, enthusiastic, loving, confident environment, you know, the worst thing you can do to an actor is rob them of their confidence. And that first day is a lot about instilling confidence in everyone in the room. And so if that isn't done, you're at a bit of a loss, particularly with a new play, and a living playwright who's there in the room with you. You're at a bit of a loss because you don't know what the parameters are for what you can discuss. Because the world that you're there to explore has not been articulated. And so it's a little bit like swatting flies. You know, you're not, it's a little bit hard, you know, you sort of want to go, okay, well, I want to play it this way, but then, you know, things just get all muddly and they get very confusing. And at least for me anyway, because I tend to prefer to be extremely specific and know exactly what I'm going to be doing, because I feel preparation gives you room to be spontaneous. But anyway, so it's very hard to do that if you haven't established the trust from very early on. Without that trust, I think it's hard to really feel comfortable in your skin asking questions, or, you know, saying, you know, what is this meant to be doing, or what am I meant to be doing with this, or I don't understand. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? It's very hard without that.
To clarify what I was referring to in this particular situation, this was a play written by a new playwright, and everyone came together with an idea of what we thought the play was. And it was very interesting because all the cast members had the same idea. And we hadn't discussed it with each other. But the playwright had completely different idea.
Wow.
And the director was trying to be friends with everybody. And so the director really, after we'd been in it for 2 weeks rehearsing, one day we were sitting around the way actors do in the 5-minute break, and we got to talk and said, do you think, what does that mean? Do you believe? And we didn't believe it. None of the actors did. We approached the director and we were told, well, why didn't you say so? We looked at the director. Well, honey, you're the director. And it turned out the director didn't believe it, but the director was being friends. So we had to do something. See, normally that's not my tact. But yes, you're right. That confidence.
And that comes, I
Right.
really do believe it comes from I don't care how competent and wonderful and talented everyone in the room is, without a director who really makes you confident in them,
Yes.
whether they're completely off base or not. You know, I don't know if they're off base. If they sell it well enough to me, I'll buy it. Do you know, that's what we're all there to do anyway.
Right.
So, and no actor, I don't think, wants to belittle or insult a playwright by assuming that they can tell them what their play is about. And no director or actor should expect a playwright to be their own dramaturg. That's incredibly unfair. Playwright is there to, you know, put the words on the page. It's the director's job to find the ways to articulate that theatrically. Do you know? It's not a novel, it's a play, you know.
It's so strange, though, that we've managed very well in the theater without directors for thousands of
Yes.
years.
Yes.
I wonder, you know, why this emergence? Because I think the director is more important now than ever before. Because it's so crazy what we're asked to do sometimes. You show up out of town at a regional theater to do Long Day's Journey into Night and say, oh, you're my mom, and
Yeah.
you're my father, and you're my brother. Okay, go. We have 3.5 weeks to do this. So you need that sort of leadership, as Martha says. But I guess before that, what was it? Actor manager
It was
or company?
literally
I guess
Actor
the idea of
manager is
company.
19th
Company
century, pretty
manager,
much.
yes.
Before that, I think it was
The
company.
worst
Company.
actor in the group would sit out in the house and tell him what
Yeah.
looked bad.
Yeah, I mean, I
Truly.
think it's
Zeppo
company.
Mars.
Yeah.
Well, but certainly you had that period of the actor-manager where it was one grand actor and everybody just had to get out of their way, and they brought their company around to showcase themselves.
When I was in rehearsal for Stendhal Syndrome, and I trust I can say it, it was said about conductors. It was a joke, an orchestra joke about conductors. Is why isn't it? And I would imagine one could extrapolate to director. No offense to any of our wonderful colleagues that we've worked with and loved, but why is a director like a condom? You know, it's like, well, safer with, more fun without. But I think we've had a lot of centuries to work together as companies of actors, and I think actors essentially at some level, if there's proper respect in how we talk to each other, know how to communicate as a company and can actually put a show on. Things are so sophisticated now technically, and so much needs to be pulled together. As far as an answer to your question about when do you take issue with a director or a particular moment, my perspective, having been raised by ballet dancers and having watched my whole childhood, having watched dancers work with choreographers, is I always try it because I watched people. When I would watch my folks working with Balanchine or Jerry Robbins, it was like you don't know if it works unless you try it. So I've been very lucky, and I like to try it all. If they say try it this way or that's not right, do it this way. I try not to have too much of a proprietary feeling about my choices. And if a director has an idea about how to do something that might be very different, I trust that if I do it to the best of my ability and it doesn't work, he's going to see that or she's going to see that and go, don't do that, or it's still a good idea, but you can't do it. But I like to try first and then judge it later.
In 1998, I had the extreme privilege and pleasure of joining the Steppenwolf Theater Company, and which of course has a long and illustrious history of having actors who went to school together and were friends for many years and just simply did what they wanted to do. and they didn't have an artistic director for a lot of those beginning years. They directed themselves and took turns directing each other, and they did quite extraordinary work and created an ensemble that's still together after, 30 years, or nearly 30 years. So that's pretty impressive. That's quite an accomplishment, and it says that it can be done, and it is often done. It's just a little more rare in our world right now.
I'm always looking for an authority figure, though. I don't know about any of you. I feel some comfort, as long as it's somebody that I trust. And I develop almost instantly that filial relationship to a director when I feel like a director is good. Someone that, it's part of for me, it's part of my acting, my pathology as a person, as an actor, is that I'm drawn to wanting to please, and if there's somebody at the center of a piece who loves you and who loves what you're doing and who trusts you and who brings you all together, then then there's a pole star. There's someone you can look to for guidance and ask and try to.
Someone always pops up to take that role.
Well, somebody will, and it's best if it's a good director.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, because we're going to replace that with whoever's out there.
Yeah.
And I like to do it for myself too, but I'm sure it's almost more fun when they're having a good time also,
Well, it's more fun when they're there to have the experience, not just watch us have one.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if I look so much for an authority figure, but coming into, for me, I was getting ready to do a screwball comedy. I needed somebody who could teach me. I needed somebody who was, I needed to know that he was funny and that he had done a show. Walter Bobby won the Tony for Chicago. I knew that I was coming in. I had confidence in him that I couldn't do, I did not know. I wasn't going to stand up and direct a screwball comedy and know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that Walter knew what he was doing. And on our second day, we got up and he had the whole set built with just sticks, basically, and doors. He had us moving in and out of those doors, slamming doors, this, that, because the whole thing is like music in a comedy. And I, of course, was sitting there going, great, I can slam the door. Yes, I'll do that on the line. Where's my character? When do we start working on character? When are we going to start talking about why she is this way? She's so insane. What is she doing? And it didn't happen, and we're walking indoors and slamming doors, and 2 weeks are going by, and I'm like, great, we know our lines now. And I watched this man sit back and tell us when the door, bam, 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 and 2 weeks later, then we started layering in, and I thought, he waited all this time to talk to the actors about character until our body language was so secondary to slam the door. The music was there, and then he started talking about character. And I thought, what? Restraint. It helped me understand that each director has a process, how they approach it, and I'm going back to the question a little bit earlier, when do you start saying this, that, and the other? Part of my experience with Walter was understanding that unlike Dan Sullivan, who you start talking about character in the first week with, or in the first moment, everybody has a different process, and each director approaches the kind of play they're doing in a different way. So I thought, okay, next time I'm just going to trust that the person that I'm working with understands, and if I can have the same kind of restraint that he had with me, not saying, oh, why don't you try this here and that here, when he was still trying to get me in the door at the right time in the funny moment, that he said, and I just thought it was so incredible, I said, Walter, your restraint is incredible. He said, you know what it is? I'm just finding the vein for each one of you. That's what I feel like I'm doing. And if it taps in and you get tapped in the music of all of this, then you're taking your ride. And you're with your character and with your company of actors. And I've just created the space for you to do that. And I've never heard of anybody talk about it that way. And that, again, is to me the pleasure of the theater. On a movie set, you have 1 minute to figure out character, and you better get it and take two and see you later. So it's such an amazing thing to have time to even allow somebody. Part of what we do when we walk into a room is get to be with other artists and watch their process and understanding how they get there, and understanding and hopefully trusting that a director is looking at all of these artists and he's got to figure out how to make them all work together and sing. And it's just, I was astounded by Walter and his restraint.
I think your point is so well taken. If a director gives, because there's the rehearsal process, and then the director goes away, and then it belongs to the company. And if it's been set well, and if a structure has been, and an intention, as you say, and a point of view, and we all have a strong house to live in, then they can go, the designers go away, the director goes away, and then it always grows and changes incrementally.
Sure.
God knows, incrementally, but then it stays firm, and I think that structure is very important. I think that kind of approach is really
interesting,
really valuable.
So interesting, and I imagine every director does it differently. It's just so
and
fascinating
differently for each
to
play
see.
that they do. I think
Right,
is important.
exactly.
I'm curious, we've been talking a lot about directors, and I'm curious about how you, as actors, look at other actors. Not people necessarily that you're working with in a show, because that's very close. But when you go to the theater, what is the experience like for you? What do you look for in performances? How do you respond? Do you analyze people? Do you watch it and just go as entertainment? Can you do that at this point? What do you look for, and what do you see in other people's performances?
I'm just going to jump in because I had the pleasure of seeing Jefferson in his play, and for me anyway, it was really a very it was really sort of transcendent experience. You'll forgive me for being so gushing. And not least of which was because of what you were talking about earlier about artifice. I'm all for truth in the theater, and I believe that it is true to lie. I believe what gives it its, for me anyway, it's not interesting enough just to see people being honest on stage. That I can see on Dr. Phil or something. Do you know what I mean? I want to see the art in the way they're being honest, and the choices they make in the way they move their body. How someone is telling a story with the way they use their voice, or the way they use their arms, or the way they address the audience. These are artificial things that we put on to a character, to a performance, for effect. And we should have those, because that's what draws people in, is that sort of oddity of that, and the skill. It is a skill. Otherwise, you know, sure, anybody can do it, but in watching your work specifically, I just felt like I was watching someone exercise their art, exercise their skill in the most generous, specific, simple way. And yes, it was clear to me that I was being lied to, because here's a man playing quite a few people. Do you know, there's an articulation in the play where, in I Am My Own Wife, there's a box in which there's a photograph box, and then there's another box within that phonograph box. And do you mind if I'm talking about this? Okay. And well, I mean, 'cause some actors don't like it, because, you know, they don't like to hear you emphasize a certain thing in their play. They don't want to have to think about that like that. But I'm just describing it because it speaks to your question, and I found it so moving, and it'll never leave my mind. And inside this box, which is pulled out very, very gently and very specifically, the story is being told. Objects are being described. A home that someone lives in is being talked about. And a person is being revealed in the form of these objects. And the box is opened, and these objects in miniature are removed one by one from the box to sort of illustrate, you know, this is my very pedestrian way of describing this, so forgive me. But to me, that was the perfect articulation of what the theater is. Artifice, miniaturizing, presentation, connection to the object, a language of the object, a physical language. All of these things that sort of come together theatrically And I'm not just looking at someone being honest and saying, here's my chair, that's the one I sit in. Here's my phonograph, that's the one I listen to. It's, here is my chair. Do you know, there's something so deeply moving about it to me, and I'm not sure I'm able to describe it very well. I don't think I'm doing a very good job. But I must say that's what I look for when I go to the theater. I go for a sense of that I am, that my mind is being respected, number one. That my intelligence is respected. And that I'm being drawn into a world that I am having the experience, not just watching someone feel something. That's not terribly interesting to me. I want to feel it. That's why I'm there. And that's why artifice to me is so important, and why that wall is so important. Do you know what I mean? I'm not interested in hyperrealism, and I think that's why that moment in your play, along with so many others, was just so affecting to me. I've gone on far too long.
Jefferson, what are you, having just had somebody talk about your performance, can you speak to a moment that you've watched in theater that has moved you?
Yes, I mean, there are so many. I agree. It's a strange medium in that you, I mean, again, talking about the artifice, but there is a presentation that happens, and this weird space in between performance and audience, which must be filled by both. I love the theater because of the demands it makes on an audience to lean forward, to suspend disbelief, and to enter into something. And that is what is so truly thrilling for me, this collective agreement that happens. I suppose it's kind of like, I mean, it's like church in the best possible sense of the word, of people sort of communally coming there to sit together, to kneel together, to stand up together. And that's why I love this medium. But that's what I look for. I look for communion.
And to believe that this is so.
Yes, right.
I love that church analogy. My mother used to say to me, for a while she was trying to find a good church. And she was having a hard time. We're Episcopal, and so we're sort of like diet Catholics. And it's like Catholic without the guilt. And she was trying to find a good church, and she was in a new city, living in a new place. She kept saying to me, you know, I'm having the hardest time finding a good church because everywhere I go, they're just so down to earth, you know. The pastor wears white patent leather shoes, and someone gets up and plays guitar and sings a Judy Collins song. And it's also, you know, down to earth. It's also, let's bring God down to earth. And I want to be brought up to God. I don't want to bring God down to me. That's why I go to church. It's the God show. And I want to get lifted up. And I do believe I feel the very same way about the theater. I think that's what the theater is for, not to bring, you know, bring it to the people, but, you know, to lift everyone up in that way, I think is a perfect analogy.
Phylicia, do you think theater does that, can do that?
I think theater can change people. I think theater can change people's lives. And if you look at those periods in human history where great changes in societies were made, you'll see that art was at the center of it, always at the center of it. I don't think of high and low and up and down. I think of omnipresence. That's how I think. I think that there's only one, and that the one assumes the form of many, but that the one is present in all things. So for me, it isn't a matter of up and down or high and low. It's a matter of really, really, really being, the essence of being. There is something so magical about that, and it's the most difficult thing for actors to do, is to be, because we're all so accustomed to doing things. Sometimes, I'm always learning, sometimes in a scene, when I'm not speaking, and it can be a dramatic scene, you know, there's something inside me that says, be still and take those words in. Let them into you. Let them affect you. Don't do anything. For me, that's the ultimate. And when I go to the theater, I want to be totally engaged. I want to be so engaged, I don't have to think about what I'm seeing. I'm in it. It's become one. The audience and the performance has become one. That is magical to me. And I love it. Whatever the style, you know, whatever the mode, whatever. Because I like all kinds of theater. I want to be totally engaged so that I'm not thinking about it.
Anne, you are very new to working in the professional theater. And I'm wondering, even to what Phylicia was saying about stillness. Of course, in film, when you're still, very often, they cut away to someone else, and they show that. Does theater give you the opportunity to sustain an emotion in a way that you don't always get the opportunity in film or television?
I'm not sure I understand. In film, I'm still, and they often cut away. I'm just not sure what that means.
Oh, I was just saying, because of the discipline because film, you know, if there's a conversation, you go back and forth between people, as you say, they get the moment and the moment's gone.
Right.
I'm just curious about whether it feels fundamentally different as a performer.
Oh, I mean, it definitely does. Part of why I love the different mediums is because I feel like you use a whole different set of tools, and certainly on film you're being told the story that the director wants to tell you. You're going to look here, you're going to look there, you're going to look there. And on stage you do get to have the full experience, certainly. And not only am I new to performing on stage, but I'm very new to watching theater and going to theater, because in my life I've worked, and I was on a soap opera, and I played twins, and I worked 17 hours a day. I never saw theater. I couldn't afford theater. And I've just really started to go to theater. And I am very much I am in awe of what's happening, and I am taken into the world, and I experience it in as full. I, being an actor on stage, understand that I want an audience member to give over to whatever is happening on stage with all of us. So I try to give that, like, I'm here to watch and experience all of what's going on. And when I'm in a moment, it's very funny, because when I was doing Proof, I went to Dan Sullivan's show, Mornings at 7, because he had that on Broadway. And it was such an incredible show, and it was my second day of rehearsal. And I saw all of these incredible actors, and none of them moved. They were on stage, they would come on stage, and they would stand, and I realized, I said to my husband at halftime, I call it, it's not even halftime, it's intermission, I think. Halftime break. I can't get it out of me. I said, they're so still. I thought theater was all about movement. I thought that when you came into this medium that somehow I was going to have to figure out, and I've always been an actor who uses my body, but you never see it because it's always here. And I thought, I'm so wrong. It's about being still. It's about allowing the words to be the life that is on stage. And I am the carrier, and so are the other people on stage with me. And it was the most incredible thing, and I ran into rehearsal the next day, and I said, Dan, he was a very silent man, Dan, I got it. I'm supposed to be still. What are you talking about? So I thought I was going to be flailing all over here. No, that's not what's interesting. Although I'm flailing all over the place in 20th Century. I mean, forget Dan Sullivan now, but I often, even though my character is very, very physical in 20th Century, I said to myself, I always think about something else different before I walk on stage. It's like whatever happens to me before I go on stage, there's often a focus point that I have, and it's different each night. And last night, I said, lose yourself. Lose yourself. And the night before, I said, listen. Take in the words that everybody else is saying and just listen. And so it's so funny because I think there is it's a cycle, you know, maybe next month I'll be going through the same things, but I try to add on the experience that I feel when I go to the theater, and then I take it in, and the listening and the understanding and the stillness, and then the next night I'll say, oh, go wild, you know, whatever, do whatever you want. But what's so amazing about it is that it changes every night. And then when you're in that experience of whatever that is, and every other actor is doing their own thing too, that whatever makes them be able to get out on stage, then you're in the energy of the exchange, and that's when the audience, and no kidding, you can feel that's when that space is filled. Because everybody said yes to that experience. And I go to the theater to say yes to the experience, and that's why I'm a performer too.
I'm with you. I love to go. I love to watch actors, and I go to have a great time, and I go to admire. And even when I see an actor doing something that I might have a problem with on stage, one of the first things that I've come to realize about watching it is that what I'm seeing is a trouble I've gotten myself into over and over again. I go, oh, I know where you're at. I know what, because I don't think I've ever seen a moment, an acting moment by a talented actor on stage that I quarreled with or thought they were in trouble with that was not a part of something that I had done at many, many times. The thing about stunt, I'm a totally hyperkinetic actor, so I admire stillness the way you do. I think one of the beauties of stillness on stage is that it illuminates the space around the actor. And so much of what's terrific about being a human being in a stage space is that you bring the space around you to life, not just your own performance here, but you can make real the whole space around you. I learned that about line in dancing. It's not that the dancer has a pretty line. It's just that if they have a beautiful line, what happens is that their body the line that their body draws continues on into space ahead of them and behind them. But I love that stillness too.
I have to let that be the final words. These seminars, the American Theater Wing seminars, are brought to you from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York, part of the American Theater Wing's ongoing mission of celebrating excellence and education in the theater. I hope you'll join me in thanking these extraordinary panelists, and go see a show tonight.